Hey everyone, and welcome. And special treat today for me, and I'm sure for you guys as well, is my friend and mentor is Mike Ivey. Hello, Mike. Thanks for agreeing to do this with me. How you doing? Firstly, I believe you've just come back from Lusaka. Is that right?
Yeah, so I've just spent the week in Zambia, and it was a real privilege. Second time I've been there in the last 2 years, but it's good. Yeah, the country seems to be doing well, but yeah, what most importantly, just loved the work that I was doing, and I think that's what
And that was
makes it
what is
good.
what is the work you were doing?
So in the organization that I'm working with there, which is quite a big organization that straddles quite a few African countries. In actual fact, the shareholder is an international shareholder, but it's about leadership and helping talent that is in the organization raise their leadership competency and supply chain competency, but that's not my part, so that they can be ready for future positions and
Yeah.
also just ready to take the organization to a better place. So organizations need to definitely train their people for the future, and
Yeah.
that's what's beautiful about this.
I love it. I love it. So let's dive straight in. So we're talking about leadership. We're talking about scaling, right? And I've said to lots of people over the years, if you're going to scale your business, you first have to scale you. That's what really has to scale first, which is our own leadership, our own sense of strength, who we are, connectedness, etc. Our own compass, right? And you have a particularly interesting story when it comes to the compass, because you made a big decision, and you're going to tell us hopefully about following your compass. And I know then that has led you on a long journey of growing and scaling as a leader. So why don't you just kick off and tell us a little bit about following your compass and how you did that?
Yeah, so I'm pretty much do what I do today because of heart, more so than head. And I realize that that probably needs huge explanation. But I was very privileged to grow up in big corporate world and worked for an amazing corporate global organization, and spent close on 10 years there receiving great training, great experiences. But I also knew what I really, really wanted to do, and had quite a sense of clarity around that. Although you're always lost in the right direction, you don't have all the answers. But yeah, it got to the stage where I just knew I had to take the plunge. And it might sound like I took the plunge overnight. It was a 3-year decision of training, getting myself ready, sleepless nights. Am I doing the right thing, wrong thing? Because truth is, I could have stayed where I was, and I would have been happy. The corporate world was good for me, good to me. But there's something very powerful about knowing what you're really about and spending as much of your time as possible in what you're really about. And I think that's the difference between where I was in corporate and today. In corporate, I maybe spent 30 or 40% in my strengths. Today, I would say I spend 90, 95% doing what I
Wow.
really, really love, and
Yeah.
mostly in my strengths. So I consider myself one of the really lucky ones, blessed ones, whatever word you want to use, because there aren't too many people who I think can say that.
Mm.
And I don't say that from a place of arrogance. I just, I love what I do.
Man, I love that. I love that whole thing you say, when I was in corporate, I was like running 40, 50% of my strengths. Now
Mm.
I'm running 90. There's a thing called Ikigai. And if you're familiar with Ikigai, it's a Japanese way of identifying where you should work. And you look at all these circles, and if you do it right, and it sounds to me like you're right in the center now of your ikigai is to use it there. But you make it sound like, oh well, I just made it this, and then we crossed over. Tell me about the early days then,
Mm.
of maybe even the first day when you woke up and you no longer had a salary. Tell me about that.
Yeah, so you're right. These things don't just happen. There's process in place, and even before that first month, I spent a couple of years getting mentored by somebody who I really admired in this field, and
Mm.
it was taking strange leave to do the work so that I could show up when I left corporate. But yeah, the first month was really tough because on many scales. We're talking 2006, and you get used to going to an office and having people around you, and suddenly you wake up on this particular day, and there's nowhere to get into your car to and go. So really believe I became an early pioneer in working in coffee shops. It's very common today, but if you go back to 2006, people almost frowned on somebody who had a laptop in front of them at a coffee station and just spent
Right.
hours there.
Even had
And
a laptop, to be honest.
and had a laptop, yeah. And I couldn't work from home. It was just too quiet. But suddenly I needed people around me like I had in the in the corporate world. But yeah, probably most worrying was you now have to make money. And I can remember January 2006 creating one invoice for 500 Rand. And I'd come from the golden handcuffs of the corporate world. And yeah, so there were many nights where you woke up thinking, when does this crash and burn? And truth be told, those sort of feelings in some ways have never left, because when you're an entrepreneur in your own thing, and Dave, like you've always reminded me, I sell time, and which isn't always the best model for business.
It's terrible.
So there always is this sort of notion, does this actually have a bad ending? But we're 20 years in, and so it's working. And but most importantly, it's doing what I love, and I would go back and make those decisions again today.
Don't people say, Mike, don't turn what you love into your career, because you'll kill it as something that you love? They say that about musicians, don't they? Or poetry. If you're an artist, don't try and sell your art to make money out of your art. What would you say to people like that then?
I think if you can make money out of what you love, and it's feasible to make that money, to make the money in what you love, is to me, you'd be foolish not to do it. I do also recognize that that love is where excellence comes from, and some people might find themselves in a job that they don't necessarily love. But I want to borrow from Marcus Buckingham here, where he says, can we develop the skill of finding the love in what we do? Right. And if we don't have some love in what we do, even if you are the designer of that love in the context that you're in, it probably means, one, you're never going to master anything, because mastery comes about because of love. So I feel. And it also means that a large portion of your life is found more in survival rather than thriving. I was going to say thrival. I don't think that's a word. But to me, why would you not play in the space of love? Now, I understand what people say about that. But for me, I'm so glad I work in an area of love.
I love that. Yeah. Now, I'm going to ask you a bit more questions here, but there is one. So there's these tensions on there, because in some ways you want to learn contentment, right? You're in your job. You want to say, you know what, I just need to be content where I am. Find contentment, find that love, find the love for where I am. But for you, it was intolerance of the present that created that future. You realized that I could no longer tolerate where I am. The pull to being more authentic, the more authentic me, forced me and actually empowered me to be able to get over my discomfort. How do you handle that tension? I mean, what advice do you give to somebody on one or side of that?
So I want to be content in what I've been given, and what I have not been given, I don't want to be chasing after that. So discontent, I sometimes think, is, there's a sense of jealousy for something else, and you want that something else. But what you've been given, I want to multiply that, and I want to grow that. And there's a scripture in the Bible which says, well, there's that parable about the guy who gets given 10, 5, and the one that gets given 1. And the instruction or the principle there is multiply, but multiply what you've been given. And I think contentment is being content with what's come onto your path, what you've been given, and then make that bigger. And that's something that I've really had to learn, is we naturally look at other people's paths. Even though I love what I do, we can naturally look at other people's paths and so say, oh, if only I had that. And it's like, no, be content with what you've got. You've been given a lot.
Yes. But, it's interesting. You knew, or certainly seemingly knew, that God had given you this desire to help facilitate others, help people unpack their journey. I'm sure you'll clarify what that is in a moment. Yeah. But there are others, lots of people that would say they don't know what that is, and so they're just doing the best they can, with what they can. Now, I don't necessarily need to go down that road, but what is striking about you, Mike, which I love. The very first time I met you was you were unreservedly proud. This is probably the wrong word, but clear, unreservedly and clear about who you were, and what you were called to do, right? And I think that has given you a lot of the energy to overcome some of the difficulties that you've in. Maybe you want to talk some more about that.
No, totally. So I think the biggest, not the biggest, but one of the weapons, I don't know what quite the right word would be, that one has, if you do have a strong sense of core purpose, Dave, you always talk about North Star. If you have that, it's one of the resources you hold on to when you are in challenge, because it's a bit of a light to you and it's a bit of a guide to you. If you don't have these anchors, then difficult times can be really, really challenging, because you're probably going to be swept in many different directions. So I am very grateful for that, and I think what really helped me was I began to notice the things that I love doing and the things that I thought I was good at doing. So again, let me just borrow from Marcus Buckingham. It's funny, he's just coming up, on this talk. Got a great line. He says, pay attention to what catches your attention.
Oh, I like that. Pay attention to what catches your attention.
Your attention, yeah. And for me, it was being in front of a group of people and speaking to them, engaging them in things that were going to transform. And I would put my hand up for that, even if it was going to cost me money. I can remember doing talks where I was footing the bill on getting there. Like that. So that's like paying for the ticket of the plane. But that's exactly what he says. What do you put your hand up for? Where do you go into places of flow, which is that optimal space of zero effort for attention, because you're just so in what you do. So I think, the more we identify those things in our lives, the more we can then ask questions like, where can I most live into this? And I was very glad that I came across where I could most live into this. And
I love that
vision.
Yeah. So you've been doing this 20 years, right? And you would say that, well, I know you are very much, you're a different person, even in the 10, 12 years, I can't remember how many years it is we've known each other. You're a different person now than you were then, and you're probably unrecognizable to where you were when you first left. What has grown? What would you say have been some of the key things that have grown in you, that have scaled in you over this time?
So I don't know whether we normally use the word scale with these, and Davey, you'd probably be able to tell us whether it makes sense or not. But certainly, scaled in terms of confidence. What I do requires the belief to put your head down, set fire to your insecurities, and just go. And, so I'm in front of people and I sometimes don't know where this is going to go. In actual fact, this last Sunday, I did a workshop in Pretoria, and there were about 14, 15 people there, fairly senior people in this organization. But from the word go, I had two people that you could see quite blatantly were skeptical towards me. And now you got to trust yourself, because you can see them even just talking to each other when and the beautiful part is towards the end of the day, having noticed the transformation in them and that sense of shift. So confidence is definitely something that was a scale. The other thing was having to become creative. So what I learned in my first year was that the single thing that I thought I was going to do was not going to suffice if I was going to stay alive in this water. So I left corporate to focus on a 6-day leadership training program. And I soon discovered that going to corporates and trying to sell 6 days of training wasn't something that people were going yay about, because 6 days is a lot of training. And then also you're quite new in the game. So I had to learn to branch into other areas that still were within my strength. And so today, I focus on things such as change management, culture, team effectiveness. There's coaching, there's facilitation, there's motivational speaking, there's all these different things. And almost in some ways, broadening the horizon as to where you can use your skills was something that I had to scale.
You know what? It's really good. I want to jump straight into the one point you said, which I think is a trap people fall in. You thought when you jumped that you'll be doing this.
Yes.
But you quickly understood it's actually this, but you were willing to see that and let go of this quite quickly, and allowed you then to move into the innovation space. But a lot of people make the leap and they so hang on or fall in love with this vehicle that they can't actually make the innovation leap necessary to survive. And it's something I've heard many other people say, and it's interesting that you've also brought that point up there, that you quickly understood that. So you've scaled an innovation and confidence, right?
Yeah. So if you become attached to your product, and in my case, a product would be a particular little focus area, it's very, very hard to move beyond that if you're so attached to it. And I like, in the Infinite game, Simon Sinek talks about Garmin, for example. And, I'm not an expert on Garmin, but just borrowing from him. But, he talks about how they became so attached to their products that when navigation became part of an app rather than their own product, they battled to move beyond that. And potentially Garmin could have been the app of choice today when it comes to navigation. Now, they still are around, but more, sort of niched type of products. But we've often got to scale beyond that one thing, especially as the world is changing. So the music industry, for example, had to go beyond selling records to seeing themselves as being in the entertainment industry. And if that focus is too narrow, now this is where there is a tension, because we'd often say to people, be very, very focused. And that's true too. So yes, be focused and also be prepared to.
But I think it's the understanding of what actually is. It's what I call the outcome. You focus on the outcome of what you do, not the output of what you do. So you saying the outcome of what I do is to help people build their culture or becomes better leaders, but you could have many different tools along the way that produce that outcome, right? And it's the focus must be the outcome of what it is that you do, and not the toolbox that you're using to produce the outcome, which is what you're talking about with Garmin and these other guys. If Garmin knew that they were about navigation, fall in love with navigation, didn't matter about the what tool it was using. That in itself is really interesting. So again, it's about understanding who you are, your North Star, as I use it, being grounded, and then having the confidence to take the leap on it. Here's a question. Did you ever feel the pressure to become someone else or like someone else? I mean, there's lots of motivational speakers out there, big names, facilitators. Did you ever not wake up and go, I want to be like him or her?
I don't think so. And you know me, you know how I do things, and I consider myself to be very different to many people who do what I do. And again, I'm saying that very, very carefully, because it could sound quite arrogant. But I know one of my strengths, when I do the personality traits and whatever, when it comes to things such as being flexible, adaptable, I'm off the charts. I'm the type of guy who rocks up at a hotel, and if it's good or bad, I make it work. I'm less likely to complain about it. Now, by the way, there's a huge shadow in that. Yeah. But I sort of just roll with what's happening. And that's the type of facilitation style that, I've adopted. I go into a workshop not knowing quite where I'm going, yet being fully prepared in having done hours and hours and hours and hours, thousands of hours of work in terms of having stuff here so that I can go and flow. So I suppose again, strength or weakness, not too sure. I've actually tried not to be like other people, but tried to be different from other people. And I suppose, you would be a better judge of that than me. You need to think outside of yourself. Yeah.
Which is why I'm asking the question, because you are very unique. For anyone watching, Mike and I used to work together and doing culture development. And it was a joke, because Mike used to scare me, because we'd walk into a workshop and I go, so what's the plan? He'd go, well, let's just see. So I'm completely opposite. I need a framework and a plan and all the rest of it. And some of that reflects, the shadow for me is it reflects my insecurity, right? To be able to actually work in the room. But it also reflects how different you and I are. And actually, we worked for one company, didn't we? Last year, where we lent into those differences. And it actually produced a beautiful result, right? I don't know if you want to share a little bit more about that. It leads to this.
Well, firstly, Davey, when you from a structured way, you are brilliant. And so it would be wrong for you
Too
to
kind.
be changing that. And you work well off a presentation. You really, really do. And you make the presentation speak. And it's amazing. And so the particular customer you're talking about was absolutely a wonderful experience, because we were able to work together in a room, even coaching people, the same people together, not at the same time, but I would meet with a person, then Dave would meet, then I would meet, and they were getting this different flavor. And there's probably many a coach who would say, you can't do that.
Yes.
Well, we did, and it really worked well. And even there, we played into the strengths. So you would coach sort of saying, I'm going to speak to you, or we're going to engage this particular topic. I would go in and I'd say, okay, what are we talking about today?
Yeah.
And I think people really appreciated the tight fit, loose fit way of working. So there's no right or wrong ways here. It's but I think the big thing is playing into your strengths. And I think
Interesting.
as we play into our strengths and build those strengths, so we must remember that we grow most where we are already strong.
Yeah.
So if we're talking scalability and growth, I'm never going to be the most structured, planned person. I might need to get better, because sometimes it does bite me. And we've got a funny story, and I'll share this very quickly. Dave, Kerry, Mandy, and myself went to Italy together, and Dave did all the planning and the preparation for this trip. And it was remarkable. He shared it with me, and I didn't pay any attention to it, because I thought, well, why pay attention to it? I'm with Dave. Dave's gonna just lead the way, and I'm just gonna follow, and I don't need to know anything. And as we were leaving Oliver Tambo Airport in Johannesburg to Mandy and I to fly to Madrid, no, not Madrid,
Milan.
where we were going to meet. Milan, yeah.
See, he didn't even know where he was going.
Yeah.
Milan.
We were going to meet them in Milan, and then I was just going to follow Dave. And as we were on the plane to fly out of Oliver Tambo, we get a phone call from Dave saying, there's a problem with BA, there's a strike, and we're going to probably be arriving a day or two late. And I just went, oh dear, the smart kid's not going to be there. And so again, these things all have shadows. No planning can get you into some horrible places. And yet, for me, that's what's worked, playing into those strengths, being quite loose, but knowing stuff. So some people might say, you're totally unprepared, and the answer would be no. Believe me, I prepare every single day for being able to show up.
It's interesting. It's the old story of the old mechanic that goes to a big engine that they can't get fixed, and he listens and he listens and he looks, and then he gets his hammer out and he taps it in one space, and all of a sudden the engine starts to work. And then he gives them a big bill, and the guy says, well, how can you give me for such a big bill? All you did was tap it. He says, yes, well, 10 Rand was for the tapping, and the other 3,000 was for all the years it took me to find out where to tap it. Here's another question though, Mike. Both of you and I are actually, we have similar outcomes that we want. We want to help people find clarity and leadership and grow in their own internal callings, right? But we have very different ways of getting that. But what about the CEO, the leader of an organization, who also wants to grow his company and his team and his leadership team, right? But they have very differing personalities. Is there a one size fits all for them, or how do they with confidence lean into their personality, their set of strengths to find the end?
Yeah, sure. Big question. So when it comes to people, there's never a one size fits all. So the difference between people and machines is that machines, we have absolute answers. People, we have the best direction. And if you think, and this is what makes culture so interesting and sometimes very challenging, we often battle to make significant change in our own lives, never mind trying to take a whole group of people and direct them in a particular way. But what I think research is showing us is that there are certain behavioral norms which seem to be very, very common across all teams that are high achieving. And there's just a couple of them, not many. So certain teams and certain individuals will have certain things which make them unique and which really work for them, but those things won't work for another team. But then we get these couple of norms which seem to be, again, North Star for an organization or a team to work effectively. And so, for example, one of these would be psychological safety. If you want a team to function in a cohesive way for a sustained period of time, almost all evidence would point that there has to be safety. Maybe you don't need loyalty. One team might have loyalty, one team might not have loyalty. And that seems to be a bit of a, less important. But something such as psychological safety, regardless of the team, seems to be a very, very essential ingredient in almost most teams that achieve. I'm sure there will be outliers, but the research is showing that in the majority.
It's interesting that there are principles that are true, no matter what type of personality you have or what you're leading. These principles remain true: discipline, consistency, tenacity, reading well, looking after yourself, creating psychological safety of your team. And these principles span, doesn't matter what type of person you are. You need to lean into these persons. And that's essential for scaling yourself in terms of your own leadership, right? Growing your leadership, play on these principles. But then there's this thing of don't try and mimic someone else's style, right? It's about being comfortable with your own style. If you are the guy that turns up to your exco or board meeting and you've got a loose agenda and you just want to free flow it, and that's your style, then do that, right? Lean into that, provided you've done the discipline, the consistency, the study beforehand. And, that's why I really love your story, is because you absolutely knew what you wanted the outcome of your life to look like, but you were willing to be you, Mike. And often I thought, oh, Mike just needs to be a bit more like this or a bit more like that. And yet, prove me wrong over and over again. I've been in the room where literally you've just literally sat there and looked at people and created this atmosphere for safety, and people then have started to realize of themselves on the journey where they needed to go, and it's a gift. And I want to thank you for first coming into my life and being true to you. And my encouragement to anyone listening to this is to be true to who you are. Don't lose yourself in the process of growing and becoming a leader. Adapt and apply these principles. We got 2 minutes maybe. I want you to summarize young people or people in their early 40s that are in leadership and wanting to grow in leadership and wanting to increase their capacity as a leader. What advice would you give to them?
Sure. Okay, my mind immediately just goes here. And in terms of the question, talent is often overrated. So we do need talent to open the door. And if I look at myself, although not an extroverted personality, I did realize that one thing I'd been given was the ability to talk in front of a group of people and seemingly hold their attention. And that was talent. Talent is often overrated. What's underrated is the hard work. And if you want to excel, then be prepared to put in the hard work, but make sure you're putting in the hard work in the right areas. And that's where you might need coaches or whatever. I love what I recently read from Seth Godin. He says, it doesn't matter how fast you're running if you're running in the wrong direction. And yeah, but the third and fourth thing, which I'd quickly add to that, is that we need to always remain humble as well, because every single one of us are where we are today because there have been certain individuals who have made it possible in spite of the hard work. Yeah. And that's something that we often forget about. But then the fourth thing, which I'd quickly bring in here, is that as a young leader, have people in your corner who enable you to show up every single day. So one of the things as an entrepreneur or own businessman is that it can be quite lonely out there, especially when you're feeding into other people. But the big question is, do you have people in your corner that can help you? And what you often need in your corner is not people who are like you, but people who are going to challenge you to think in different ways, who might not even like you, but in some way they actually make you sharper. So achievement is a function of talent, hard work, opportunity, and the people who are behind us. And so I would be encouraging leaders all the time to be building or focusing on those, but to not over-focus on the fact that you've got this talent. Celebrate the talent, but take it further now through hard work. Apply the hard work to your talent.
I love that. Apply the hard work to your talent, and and follow that North Star. Have the courage of your conviction in that. Mike, what a fantastic story. And I know we're going to hear more of you, as we do more of these podcasts, etc. And if you go to my YouTube channel, there are lots of videos that Mike and I have done on many, many topics that are there, and you can dig into those as well. Mike, thank you so much for giving me time. It is a Friday afternoon, and you're giving me some of that time, which is amazing. And Yeah, I hope you have a fantastic weekend, and thanks everyone for listening in. We will chat soon.